Good evening, brothers and sisters. I have an extra special piece of literacy that I would love to share with you, and it is of, very high importance. This is the preface, the original preface to Pomeroy's Volume 1, of which there's 3, and they've been expanded upon by editors because he died right after making the first edition. But this is the preface from the very first volume in 1881. Please listen, it's wonderful. This is English, which we happen to speak. Preface. Let me just check the recording here. The author herewith submits to the legal profession a textbook which treats, in a somewhat comprehensive manner, of the equitable jurisdiction as it is now held by the national and state tribunals, and of the equitable jurisprudence as it is now administered by the courts of the United States, and of all those states in which the principles of equity originally formulated by the English Court of Chancery have been adopted and incorporated into the municipal law. It is proper that he should, in a few words, explain the motives which led to the preparation of such a work and describe the plan which he has pursued in its composition. While the Supreme Court of Judicature Act was pending before the British Parliament, there appeared in the Saturday Review a series of articles written by one of the ablest lawyers and most profound thinkers of the English bar, which pointed out a grave danger threatening the jurisprudence of England in the plan, as then proposed the combining of legal and equitable rights and remedies in the same action and administering them by the same tribunal. The writer showed, as an inevitable result of the system, that equitable principles and doctrines would gradually be suppressed and disappear in the administration of justice. That they would gradually be displaced and supplanted by the more inflexible and arbitrary rules of the law, which we call at law now. Until in time, equity would practically cease to be a distinctive branch of the national jurisprudence. And there's a subnote number 1, which leads right. The reality of the danger and the importance of the legislative enactment by which it was averted are most unmistakably shown in the current series of English reports. Able common law judges taking a part in the decision of equitable causes are frequently represented as attacking and even denouncing equitable principles and doctrines which have for centuries been treated by the Court of Chancery as fundamental and elementary principles, which have been most fruitful in results and have been applied in numberless forms to the equity jurisprudence. Can there be a doubt that equity, exposed to such judicial attacks from members of the highest court, would gradually have succumbed and finally ceased to be a distinctive part of the English municipal law? The reasoning of these remarkable articles was so cogent and convincing that it produced a deep impression not only upon the English bench and bar, but even upon Parliament. And it ultimately led to an amendment of the Act by the addition of the following clause, which has undoubtedly averted the anticipated danger. And I've heard this sentence quoted many of times by Christian Walters, and it's just a joy to read it. It's right in the preface. He's such a beautiful gentleman. Generally, in all matters in which there is a conflict or variance between the rules of equity and the rules of the common law, which we now call at law, with reference to the same subject matter, the rules of equity shall prevail. One more time. Generally, in all matters in which there is a conflict or variance between the rules of equity and the rules of the common law, with reference to the same matter, the rules of equity shall prevail. God bless you. I have referred to this incident simply for the purpose of indicating its application under like circumstances to the law of our own country, as will we here in Canada. The arguments of the English essayist, one who writes an essay, an essayist, were purely a priori being Latin for coming before that, and were confined to the judicial system of England. They were confined to the judicial system of England. They would apply with equal force to a large portion of the American states, and the correctness of his conclusions is established by the judicial experience of those commonwealths during the past 30 years. Since the first New York Code of Practice in 1848, about one half of the states and territories have adopted the reformed procedure. As the central conception of this system is the abolition of all external distinctions between actions at law and suits in equity. That's the difference. You have actions at law, and we have suits in equity. The union of legal and equitable rights and remedies in one proceeding, and the substitution of many important equitable in place of legal methods. It was confidently supposed that in the progress of time, the doctrines of equity would obtain a supremacy. The doctrine, it was presumed. It was confidently supposed that in progress of time, the doctrines of equity would obtain a supremacy over those of the law in the administration of justice, and that the entire jurisprudence of a state or province would gradually become more equitable, more informed with equitable notions. It must be confessed, I think, that the experience of the past 30 years in these states points to a directly contrary result. Every careful observer, you and I, must admit that in all the states which have adopted the reformed procedure, there has been, to a greater or lesser degree, a weakening, decrease, or disregard of equitable principles in the administration of justice. I would not be misunderstood. There has not, of course, been any conscious intentional abrogation, which means repeal or abolishment. There has not been any conscious intentional abrogation or rejection of equity on the part of the courts. The tendency, however, has plainly and steadily been towards the giving an undue prominence and superiority to purely legal rules. Purely legal rules, what we now call legal, and the ignoring, forgetting, or suppression of equitable notions. Ignoring, forgetting, and suppressing of equitable notions. Welcome to the revival of equity, everyone. I didn't start it. The correctness of this conclusion cannot be questioned nor doubted. The consenting testimony of able lawyers who have practiced under both systems corroborates it. And no one can study the current series of state reports without perceiving and acknowledging its truth. We need to study the current series of state reports, right? And then you will perceive and acknowledge its truth. God bless you. In short, the principles, doctrines, and rules of equity are certainly disappearing from the municipal law of a large number of the states and provinces. And this deterioration will go on until it is checked either by a legislative enactment or by a general revival of the study of equity through the ranks of the legal profession. But what we're going to do is just read. This deterioration will go on until it is checked by a general revival of the study of equity. And that's exactly what we're doing. Thank God for these gentlemen who care about us, or who care about equitable rights. I would not be understood as condemning the reformed procedure on this account. The tendency which I have mentioned may be checked. The danger is incidental and can easily be prevented. A brief legislative enactment, substantially the same as that added to the English Judicature Act, would render the system perfect in theory and would secure to equity the life and prominence which properly belong to it and which should be preserved. The state of Connecticut has incorporated the clause into its recent reformatory legislation that it should not have been added to all the codes of procedure is very surprising. I need not dwell upon the disastrous consequences of the tendency above described. If it should go, disastrous tendencies of what's above described, merging of equitable and legal courts. If it should go on to its final stage, even a partial loss of equity would be a fatal injury to the jurisprudence of a state or province. So far as equitable rules differ from those of the law, they are confessedly more just and righteous, and their disappearance would be a long step backwards in the progress of civilization. It is of vital importance, therefore, that a treatise on equity for the use of the American bar. We are standing, even here in Canada, this continent we have currently called America, that a treatise on equity for the use of the American bar should be adopted to the existing condition of jurisprudence throughout so large a part of the United States. It should be based upon and should present in the clearest light those principles which lie at the foundation of equity and which are the source of its doctrines and rules, the equitable maxims. In this respect, the plan of the present work was deliberately chosen, and has been steadily pursued, the present work, even when it has led to amplifications which might perhaps be regarded by some readers as unnecessary. It has been my constant endeavor to present the great underlying principles which sustain the whole superstructure of equity, and to discuss, explain, and illustrate them in the most complete manner. Some of these principles are so comprehensive and fruitful that one who has grasped them in their fullness of conception has already mastered the system of equity. All else is the mere application of these grand truths to particular circumstances. You can apply these grand truths to particular circumstances. Such a treatise, designed for the American profession, if it would at all meet and satisfy the needs of the bench and bar, must also be based upon and adopted to the equitable jurisdiction which is actually possessed by the state and national courts, and the equitable jurisprudence which is actually administered by them. It must recognize the existing condition both of law and equity, the limitations upon the chancery jurisdiction resulting from the varying statutes, and the alterations made by American legislation, institutions, and social habits, many departments of equity, many doctrines, and modes of applying the jurisdiction, which were important at the earlier day and are perhaps still prominent in England, have become practically obsolete in this country, while others have risen in consequence and are constantly occupying the attention of the courts. Others. It has been my purpose and endeavor to discuss and describe the equity jurisprudence as viewed in this light, and to present the actual system which is now administered by the courts of the United States, in capital letters, and of all the states, because the United States and all of the states are two different things, brethren. As an illustration, I have attempted to ascertain and determine the amount of jurisdiction held by the different state tribunals as limited and defined by statutes and established by judicial interpretation, and have not confined the treatment of this subject to a mere account of the general jurisdiction possessed by the English Court of Chancery. It is true that the fundamental principles are the same as those which were developed through the past centuries by the English Chancery, but the application of these principles and the particular rules which have been deduced from them have been shaped and determined by the modern American national life, and have received the impress of the American national character. It has been my design, therefore, to furnish the legal profession a treatise. Treatise means body of words. It's a book. Treatise, which should deal with the equity, jurisdiction, and jurisprudence, as jurisdiction is like the controlling power, and the jurisprudence is like the case law behind it, as they now are throughout the United States, with their statutory modifications and limitations, and under their different types and forms in various groups of states, and thus to prepare a work which would be useful to the bench and bar in all parts of our country and Canada. During its composition, Canada didn't exist, and so that's why it applies to us, but doesn't say so, because we didn't exist. But we're having the same problem they're having, because we're the same people on the same continent. During its composition, I have constantly had before me a high ideal. Wonderful, high ideals. The difficulty in carrying out this conception has been very great. The labor which it has required has been enormous. That I may have fallen short on this ideal in all its completeness and perfection, I am only too conscious. Its full realization was perhaps impossible. If the book shall be of any help to the courts and the profession in administrating equitable doctrines and rules, if it shall be of any assistance to students in disclosing the grand principles of equity, if it shall to any extent maintain the equitable jurisprudence in its true position as a constituent part, the equitable jurisdiction in its true position as a constituent part of the municipal law, then the time and labor spent in its composition will be amply repaid. He's paid it forward to us, and it will be repaid. Wonderful. The internal plan, the system of classification and arrangement of modes of treatment, and especially the reasons for departing from the order and methods which have usually been followed by text writers, are described at large in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th sections of the introductory chapter, sections of one chapter. To that chapter I would respectfully refer any reader who may at the outset desire a full explanation of these matters. These are the matters which are so important to a full understanding of an author's purposes and to a correct appreciation of his work. The book is submitted to the profession with the hope that it may be of some aid to them in their judicial and forensic duties, and may accomplish something for the promotion of justice, righteousness, equity in the legal and business transactions and relations of society. Hastings College of the Law, San Francisco, May 1881. J.N.P. John Norton Pomeroy. And if you'd like this book, I'll send you the link. It's for free, and it's PDF. Now you've heard the original preface, Volume 1 Pomeroy. We call it Pomeroy Volume 1. God bless you.